Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Hopton Dunn, Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards, Jamaica. Mrs. Velma Ricketts Walker, CEO and Commissioner of the Jamaica Customs Agency. Ms. Doreen Prendergast, Chief Technical Director, who is representing the Director General of the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Edson Carr, who is representing the Executive Director of the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Colleagues in the Ministries of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change, and the Economic Growth and Job Creation Ministry. Representatives from the private sector, members of the media, and other stakeholders online and in person. Pleasant morning to you. Wishing you season's greetings as well. I am Olivia Anderson, the Manager for Public Education and Corporate Communication at the National Environment and Planning Agency. I wish to thank you for joining us for this press conference, which is being hosted by the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change, to announce the third phase of the ban on plastic packaging material, which is scheduled to come into effect on January 1, 2020. Our Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Audrey Sewell, is not here with us today, as she has proceeded on some well-deserved leave. However, her thoughts are with us today, and she's supportive of the decisions taken with regard to the ban. Ladies and gentlemen, as we're all aware, phase 1 of the ban on the importation, manufacture, distribution, and use of specific types of single-use plastics with dimensions not exceeding 24 by 24 inches and thickness of 1.2 mils, and the importation of expanded polystyrene foam products that have been used in the food and beverage industry came into effect in 2019. In 2020, we moved to phase 2 with a ban on the manufacture and use of expanded polystyrene foam products. This morning, we are here to announce phase 3 of the ban, which is due to take effect on January 1, 2021, and will be detailed by Minister Charles in his presentation. We have much to get through this morning, so without further ado, I now invite Mr. Peter Knight, CEO and Government Town Planner of the National Environment and Planning Agency, to bring remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Good morning to you all, and season's greetings to you and your staff and your families, and I wish for you a COVID-free holiday season. Honorable Minister, Madam Chairperson, I wonder if I could just accept the salutation of the Chairperson and just say all protocols observed. Since my 5 minutes will be taken up by referring to all the names. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pride to stand here as we prepare to enter phase 3 of the ban on single-use plastics. In 2018, the government was faced with making what I would call the decision of the decade, which was and continues to be a reaffirmation of its commitment to environmental protection. In this very banquet hall room, several iterations and discussions with the public, private sector, and environmental NGOs leaders were had by a government team led by the Honorable Darrell Vaz and Senator Matthew Samuda, who had earlier moved a private member's motion to introduce a ban on plastics. With the announcement of the ban on the 17th of September 2018, Minister Vaz had charged all of us, number of ministries, departments, and agencies, to include the Jamaica Information Service, the Jamaica Customs Agency, the then Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries, the Trade Board, the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, National Solid Waste Management Authority, Vision 2030 Jamaica, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and NEPA to implement a comprehensive program to sensitize the public, draft the appropriate legislation, and to work to enforce compliance. There have been challenges, but I must credit each of the entities I earlier named for the focused attention to this national issue. Where are we? So an extensive stakeholder relations and corporate communications program valued at over $40 million and counting has been implemented by NEPA with support from the Jamaica Information Service and the National Solid Waste Management Authority. Together, the team traveled island-wide to engage Jamaicans from all walks of life, explaining the purpose and implications of the ban. We use the print and electronic media. We publish advertisement announcing each phase of the ban in 3 newspapers, and yes, there are 3 newspapers. There's one in Montego Bay. We went on over 13 radio stations and 2 local free-to-air television stations, and we have participated in numerous interviews. We have also kept the nation and the world abreast with the ban, with a social media campaign implemented in 2019, themed Plastic-Free Jamaica, which drew on local influencers, IT and Fancy Cat, and testimonials from Rainforest Seafoods and the Orocabessa Marine Trust. We established hotline 876-285-8531 and a dedicated email address, policyonplasticban@nepa.gov.jm, was made available to the public since September 2019. Both have received over 800 queries, respectively, to date. Over the coming weeks, you will see electronic billboards across the island, in addition to radio and TV, PSAs, and social media engagement. I'd just like to say a little bit about the legislative process. You know, we developed, as I said, we were charged by the then minister to develop the legislation. 2 plastic packaging material prohibition orders have been gazetted under the Natural Resources Conservation Authority and the Trade Acts to concretize the ban and give legal underpinnings to the ban. To date, 41 companies and individuals have been charged and placed before the courts. 27 have been convicted. The remaining matters are set for trial in 2021. Given the ban on expanded polystyrene foam previously used in the food and beverage sector, I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate the major players in the sector for transitioning to paper cardboard-based biodegradable food containers. We have, however, noted a proliferation in the use of other plastic food containers by some restaurants and cook shops and industry players. This is a major concern of the agency and the government, a concern that has been expressed by a number of stakeholders in the media, and I'm sure you would have followed those media comments if the ban is really in place and if it is working. Based on assessment carried out as part of the recently concluded regulatory impact assessment on single-use plastic, the government will be pursuing a number of new policy options, and I'm not going to speak to those. I'm going to leave those for Minister Pernell Charles Jr. to speak to you about. But I can tell you that we are executing a United Nations Environment Program, Government of Japan sponsored Plastic Waste Minimization Project. And this is to support and build on the government's thrust to minimize single-use plastics in the waste streams. During the recently concluded inaugural Plastic Waste Management Conference, over 300 key plastic consuming, producing, and regulating stakeholders were brought together to discuss an integrated approach to tackling the island's plastic pollution problem. On another key component of the project, my friend and colleague, who is represented by Edson Carr this morning, Audley Gordon and his team, have been doing an excellent job in the Raytown area, and I will leave Edson to speak to that. Under the Plastic Waste Minimization Project, we were able to initiate the Supermarket Plastic Recyclables Drop-Off Program in collaboration with Recycling Partners of Jamaica. During the 2-month pilot phase, over 5,000 pounds of plastic was collected at Lee's Food Fair Supermarket, with an overwhelming positive response from the shoppers. As a result, an island-wide initiative was launched on December 9, 2020, and will be led by Recycling Partners of Jamaica, and I see the chairman here, Dr. King, in collaboration with other private sector partners, including Magna Rewards Limited. The model will be replicated in supermarkets and wholesales island-wide, including Hong's Supermarket in Portmore and L&M Grocery in St. Ann, both of which will be launched in 2021. You know, before I close, I did refer to the commitment and support from the various sector groups. And I see the president of the JMEA this morning. And I know early in the implementation, before we went to implementation, we met with Chairman Pandui and his team. And I can say to you all that it has been phenomenal. The support and cooperation that we have had from the private sector, even a private sector company that was into producing styrofoam, I think eventually got the message and, you know, looked to other avenues to support what the government was doing. I know Minister Charles has some decisions to make, and we will see what he says this morning. But what we want is to encourage all Jamaicans to continue to do, each and every one of us, to do our part to preserve our land and support the plastic ban as we work toward a plastic-free Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight, for that insightful overview. I now invite Mr. Hopeton Heron, who is the Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, to give us the BSJ's perspective on the status of the development of standards by the Bureau, as well as relevance to the plastic ban. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Honorable Minister Charles, colleagues at the table, observing all protocols, government, private sector, representatives, all. BSJ is pleased to have been integrally involved in the ban on plastics over the past 2 years or so. It was led, you will recall, by our then Chairman Honorable Matthew Samuda, as you have heard Peter highlighted. So what is the role of the Bureau and what have we been doing over the past 2 years or so? The Bureau of Standards is a facilitator. We facilitate the development of good practices and standards by the development of standards, first of all. In addition to that, we have laboratories that can support the industry by doing chemical tests, by microbiological tests, strength tests, dimensions tests, thickness tests, chemical composition, to identify whether it is polyethylene, polypropylene, or if there are any microbiological issues with the plastics. We also do calibration and we do training. So where are we where standards is concerned? There are no standards at this time for biodegradable plastics, but the preparation of those standards are well advanced, very well advanced, and maybe at the final stage. And by the first quarter of 2021, those standards will be in place. But the community, the global community, is never without standards. They may not be adopted Jamaican standards, but we use international standards to do the work we do to advise industry as to what must be done. So we have been using ASTM standards to inform the decisions that we make. How it works is that any manufacturer, distributor, or users of plastic is invited or should take their products to the Bureau, and the Bureau will do the necessary tests, whether it is a dimension test, whether it's a thickness test, chemical composition test, or defining whether it is plastics or not. And then we give them back the results. Now, also, we work with the regulators. The regulators would be interested in the outcome of the test because based on our test results, they can then say, does it fit with the ministerial order in place? Is it thickness 1.2 mils or 2.5 mils, or what thickness is it and whether it qualifies or not? So the Bureau provides technical support and facilitates the industry to make decisions so that the regulator can then decide whether the plastics can be integrated into the system or whether it is a part of the banned component. I like to say this to just clarify that the Bureau will not be the one who makes the final decisions. The results of the Bureau inform the final decision, and it is clear from the results that we do. But we do the test, and we provide the regulator. The regulator could be NEPA under the NRCA Act, or it could be the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, that is NCRA, who regulates trade. And those are the ones who then get the results along with the manufacturer or whoever asks us to do the test, and they decide whether they can pass through customs with the thing or not. So we stand as facilitator, technical facilitators. And we have been doing these tests. At the present time, we cannot do tests for biodegradable. That needs capital investment. It needs equipment to be bought. And over the next fiscal year, we will see how much we can integrate or get that piece of equipment. But at the present time, we just test for plastics, and we test all the other dimensions as outlined in the ministerial order or in the international standards that we reference. And as I say, by the first quarter, we will have that in place. So we also do training in good manufacturing practice, good agricultural practice, and other things. So the role of the Bureau is really to, at this morning's meeting, is to invite manufacturers, distributors, users of plastic to take your products to the Bureau, because then we can characterize it, we can test it, we can put the results in your hands to see if you qualify based on the ministerial order, or along with your regulator, which is the environmental regulator or the trade regulator, decide whether your product can go on the market or not. I think I will leave it at that this morning, and we are glad to be participating in this exposure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Heron. Just a note to representatives from the media, we're asking you to continue to hold your questions until all the speakers have made the relevant presentations. We will be taking the questions alternately, one from in person, then one online for 20 minutes. I would like to invite Mr. Edson Carr, who is representing the Executive Director for the National Solid Waste Management Authority, to come at this time.
Good morning, all. I would like to formally acknowledge the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change, Chief Technical Director Doreen Prendergast, representing the Director General, Chief Technical Director Ms. Gillian Guthrie, Mr. Knight, CEO of NEPA, and Mr. Hopeton Heron, Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards of Jamaica, members of the media, and other stakeholders present and online. Today, I bring remarks on behalf of the Executive Director of the National Solid Waste Management Authority, Mr. Audley Gordon. The NSWMA is pleased to join hands with all stakeholders present today to help sensitize the public on the implementation of the third phase of the plastic ban. The respective ban on single-use plastic bags, straws, and polystyrene, styrofoam, is seen by the NSWMA as one of the most significant steps taken by the government to enhance the framework to protect our environment. It is well known that plastics has one of the longest rates of decomposition of all the characters within the Jamaican waste stream, and any reduction in the amount disposed of our disposal site is welcomed. Anecdotal evidence, however, speaks to us still having some amount of black plastic bags being disposed of at our disposal sites, inclusive of other plastic packaging materials. And this is something that was alluded to by Mr. Knight, something that we should have a look. This is something that we would love to address because plastics is one of the more flammable components on our disposal sites, and we want to keep it away from these facilities. To aid this, the NSWMA has been playing its part to reduce the amount of PET bottles entering our disposal site through several diversion mechanisms which seek to engender a culture of separation at source. We have two projects ongoing currently, our Northern Belt project and the Raytown Recycling project, which work specifically on separation at source. The Northern Belt project is an initiative that has seen 16 communities within the Kingston and St. Andrew focusing on separation of their household-generated plastic bottles. And we have collections from these communities once every 2 weeks. Through this initiative and our partnership with Recycling Partners of Jamaica, we have collected over 50,000 pounds of plastic bottles from these communities since January. And for those who were able to watch the news last night, TVJ News that is, you would have seen a feature on our environmental wardens in the community of Raytown. The operations of these environmental wardens have yielded us approximately over 13,000 pounds of plastics since June of this year. Wardens are charged with the removal of plastic bottles from the household, as well as the Paradise Street Gully and the shoreline within the Raytown community. We at the NSWMA will not relent in the work we have started, as we believe that a cultural shift in how residents manage our solid waste is important to the safety and health of our society. As such, we'll be seeking to promulgate regulations for separation at source of the varied elements of our waste stream in the near future. Notwithstanding this fact, we are far advanced in finalizing other critical regulations. These include the NSWM Hazard Waste Electronic and Electronic Regulations 2020, which speaks to e-waste, the NSWM Public Cleansing Regulations 2020, the NSWM Disposal of Solid Waste Facilities Regulations 2020. And we also await the start of the deposit return scheme. The NSWMA will stand steadfast with our continued partnership with MUREC as we seek to create a positive change needed to ensure the sustainability of our environment, and is eager to hear the announcement from the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr. in relations to the decisions of the third phase of the ban. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Minister Charles, the ultimate word is yours. And so I invite you to announce the decisions that have been taken with regard to phase 3 of the ban on single-use plastics.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. Your introduction sounded so ominous. Today is a good day. It's not a day for us to fret. Let me start by accepting your order of salutations and just taking the opportunity to acknowledge and commend the key public sector agencies who have partnered with my ministry and with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation before in remaining committed to the implementation of the government's policy on single-use plastics. I see Mrs. Velma Ricketts-Walker here from the Customs Agency. Of course, Mr. Peter Knight, CEO of NEPA, Mr. Audley Gordon in his absence, and Mr. Carr, who represents him, Mr. Hopton Heron, Executive Director of the BSJ. I also see Mrs. Laurice Edwards-Brown, CEO of the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, Mr. Mackenzie, my very own CTD Guthrie and CTD Prendergast, as well as our Permanent Secretary in her absence and Director General. It's very important also for us to express appreciation to those members of the private sector who have, despite some challenges, of course, continued to support the government's ban on single-use plastics. And by their support, they have acknowledged their own role in identifying and promoting effective solutions to regulate and limit plastic pollution in our country. In this regard, let me recognize, of course, Mr. Richard Pandui, the President of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association. I see Mr. King here. I see other friends from the JMEA, and all stakeholders. This is certainly an effort that reflects the necessary partnership for us to advance our mutual objectives. Now, last year, December, I believe it was December 31st, my colleague Minister Vaz, in his capacity then, announced the government's ban on specific categories of single-use plastic packaging materials. The announcement came after intense consultation with the private sector and civil society on the way forward for our country. And I'm happy to say that this initiative has been one of the environmental success stories of the administration. Of course, it has not been without its own challenges, but by and large, we have collectively made a decisive step in addressing some of the island's perennial waste issues which has serious implications for environment, public health, social well-being, and climate change. And we would like to applaud our citizens, all Jamaicans across the length and breadth of our country, who have responded to the call and are assiduously playing their own part to protect and conserve Jamaica's environment, and by extension, our quality of life for generations to come. To date, the implementation of the ban has been supported by an intense public education and awareness campaign led by the National Environment and Planning Agency. Unfortunately, due to the impacts of COVID-19, the agency, of course, like all other agencies, Mr. Knight, has had some hiccups as we execute the campaign throughout this year. But I know that efforts will be made by NEPA and by the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change, as well as MEGJC, for us to continue our thrust to disseminate the information on the ban on the single-use plastics to the wider population. So this public education and awareness campaign will continue in the new financial year. And I want to use the opportunity to ask all stakeholders to partner with the government in spreading the word. Each one, teach one. It's very important for also the Jamaican consumers to understand their own role in being more conscientious in the procurement of goods and services. And so we encourage you to actively seek out and patronize those companies that are reflecting the environmentally friendly products in the market and those who have established a good track record of environmental performance. Correspondingly, the industry is being asked to respond effectively to the market demand for eco-friendly products, including minimizing plastic packaging and the redesigning of products. Today, I will share with you the details of Phase 3 of the ban on the single-use plastics, which is governed by two pieces of legislation, namely the Trade Plastic Packaging Materials Prohibition Order 2018 and the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Plastic Packaging Material Prohibition Order of 2018. Under Phase 3, the importation, distribution, manufacture, and use of commercial quantities of single-use plastic bags of dimensions not exceeding 24 by 24 and thickness of 2.5 mils, as well as drinking straws made wholly or in part of polyethylene or polypropylene manufactured for single use and attached to or forming part of packaging of juice boxes or drink pouches are banned as at January 1st, 2021. We have had intense discussions with the relevant public sector agencies and the private sector leading up to Phase 3 of the ban. And these orders were promulgated 24 months ago. Based on our circumstances, we continue to foster partnership and collaboration with all stakeholders, and the government will be implementing the ban January 1st, 2021, but will be affording a transition and review period of 6 months before fully effecting enforcement of the ban. And it must be noted that within this period of time, it is expected that the private sector will deplete or replace all affected products currently circulated in the trade. 2, it is expected that they will ensure that the production processes are retrofitted as appropriate to facilitate compliance with the provisions of the ban. And 3, the public sector will ramp up its public education and awareness raising activities. Now, let me make it very clear that in this period of time, we will have to have ongoing review to ensure its effectiveness. Our goal is a mutual one. It is to advance the policy of the government to protect the people of Jamaica. Throughout this time, I will also welcome the continuous feedback and recommendations of all stakeholders so that at the end of that period, we will have a comprehensive understanding of the best steps forward. The government intends, after this period and after our reviews, to institute prosecutions in the parish courts as necessary for all persons found in breach of the orders. And so I ask again for the cooperation of all Jamaicans to ensure the continued success of the ban on single-use plastics. The government will continue to support our partners in the private sector, which is the engine of growth, in doing business while at the same time ensuring the environmental and public health of the country is safeguarded. We recognize that the issues with the plastics and microplastics in the country will not be fully addressed with the implementation of the current ban on single-use plastics. The majority of the plastic waste generated in our country is plastic bottles, specifically the PET bottles. As had been previously announced and referred to also by Mr. Knight, the government has discussed and we have charged Recycling Partners of Jamaica Limited with the implementation of the deposit refund scheme on plastic bottles. This is going to be a very important step, one of the elements in advancing the government's policy. The deposit refund scheme will allow for the application of a deposit on plastic bottles placed in the market and a cash rebate to the consumer on the return of these bottles to the designated redemption centers across the island. This rebate will be per bottle and not per pound as currently obtains. And you may recall that the members of the private sector had instituted a self-imposed $1 per bottle in early 2019 to allow the Recycling Partners of Jamaica Limited to put the necessary infrastructure in place to facilitate a full rollout of the deposit refund scheme. And this includes the installation of reverse vending machines, the establishment of collection and redemption centers, as well as the implementation of a comprehensive public education and awareness campaign. The deposit refund scheme will be implemented in keeping with per annum recovery rates established by the government in consultation with the private sector and other key stakeholders. In closing, the government is cognizant that the deposit refund scheme is eagerly awaited by all, and we intend to ensure that it is efficiently and effectively implemented in short order, and we are working with Mr. King and the RPJL team. I look forward to dialogue with everyone on all important issues related to the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change, all of our portfolio areas, including that of the very critical area of environmental management and climate change. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Charles, for giving us a clear direction of where we are going. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for questions. We're going to be taking one question from the room, and then we'll be taking one from online. When you ask your question, please identify yourself. If you're representing an organization, we ask that you do so as well. Taking the question from within the room. Okay, I see there are no questions in the room, so we will proceed to online. Are there any questions from our colleagues joining us online? All right. This has been a very good press conference this morning. No questions. Everything has been crystal clear, I imagine. So we're going to close, there being no question. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having joined us today. We do hope we were able to shed some light on the decisions that were taken with regard to phase 3 of the ban on single-use plastic packaging materials, and that some of your concerns were indeed addressed. For more information, we invite you to visit the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change website, as well as the National Environment and Planning website. With that said, I wish for you a safe, peaceful, and happy holiday season, and the very best for 2021 and beyond. Thank you.